September 2023. Inside MGM Resorts properties, parts of the digital machinery that normally keeps everything moving are beginning to fail. Reservations are disrupted. Guests report problems with payments, room access, and casino systems. Some machines are dark. A company built to process enormous numbers of transactions, reservations, and guest requests is suddenly fighting to keep parts of its operation running. You might expect something this disruptive to begin with some extraordinary piece of malware, a secret vulnerability, a brilliant technical breakthrough. But public reporting pointed towards something much simpler. Someone may have convinced another human being that they were an MGM employee, and that may have been enough to open the door. Public reporting tied the intrusion to Scattered Spider and described attackers impersonating an MGM employee in an interaction with corporate support. MGM has never published a complete technical reconstruction, so the exact conversation remains unknown. That difference matters because the attackers did not necessarily need to defeat every layer of MGM's security. They only needed one part of the organization to make the wrong decision about identity. That is social engineering at its core, not hacking a machine, hacking a decision. A legitimate employee contacts support because something is wrong, and the support team is supposed to help. But that creates a difficult question. How do you know the person asking for help is really an employee? Scattered Spider became unusually dangerous because its members appeared extremely comfortable exploiting that question. The FBI and cybersecurity responders have described Scattered Spider operations as heavily dependent on telephone-based social engineering. The people behind those interactions could sound natural. They understood corporate environments. They knew how employees spoke. And instead of behaving like distant attackers probing a machine from the outside, they could behave like someone who belonged inside the company. Before anyone reaches an internal system, an attacker only needs enough context to make a false identity believable. A name, a role, a reason for needing help. Large organizations inevitably expose pieces of that context through professional profiles, corporate announcements, and other public information. None of it automatically gives someone access, but it can make a stranger sound less like a stranger. The person answering the request thinks they are helping a colleague. The attacker only has to fit that expectation.
And once a believable human identity becomes accepted as a legitimate digital identity, the scale of the problem changes. The attacker is no longer standing outside asking to come in. Now the company's own systems may begin treating them as someone who belongs there. Human trust becomes digital access. Somewhere inside MGM, the company realized it had a serious problem. On September 12th, MGM publicly announced that it had identified a cybersecurity issue affecting certain systems. The company said it had notified law enforcement, brought in outside cybersecurity experts, and taken steps to protect its systems and data. One of those steps was drastic. MGM began shutting certain systems down. Not because taking critical systems offline across a casino empire is convenient, because leaving compromised systems running can be more dangerous than taking them offline. And that creates a brutal decision. What happens when the safest computer is the one you switch off? This is where a cyber attack stops looking like something happening inside a server room. MGM operates hotels, casinos, restaurants, entertainment venues, and reservation systems. Digital infrastructure sits underneath huge parts of that experience. Guests need rooms, employees need systems, reservations need databases, payments need communication. Casino operations depend on networks of technology that guests normally never have to think about until those systems disappear. During the incident, MGM acknowledged disruptions at some of its properties. Its website and mobile applications were affected enough to hurt booking availability. MGM later said September occupancy at affected operations was 88%, compared with 93% in the prior year period. Contemporary reporting and accounts from guests showed what the disruption looked like on the ground. Some guests reported problems making electronic payments. Others described issues with ATMs and digital room access. Reporters documented casino machines showing unavailable or offline states. Reservations became more difficult. Not everything stopped. MGM emphasized during the incident that its resorts remained open and that dining, entertainment, and gaming continued operating. But that almost makes the story more revealing. The buildings were still there. The employees were still there. The casino floors were still there. Yet parts of the invisible digital nervous system connecting those operations had been disrupted. A cyber attack had become a hotel problem, a customer service problem, a reservation problem, a casino floor problem, a business problem. And MGM's response shows the strange asymmetry of modern infrastructure. Turning off one system can protect another, but every defensive shutdown can also remove something the physical business depends on. That is why the damage from incidents like this cannot be measured by asking how many computers were affected. The real question is, what did those computers control? By October, MGM said its domestic operations had returned to normal and virtually all guest-facing systems had been restored. The company also said the attackers had obtained personal information belonging to some customers, although MGM stated that customer bank account numbers and payment card information had not been accessed. Then came the number that put the disruption into perspective. MGM estimated that the cybersecurity incident had reduced its adjusted property EBITDA by approximately $100 million. Forget the accounting terminology. The simple version is that MGM estimated the incident reduced operating performance by roughly $100 million. Separately, the company said it incurred less than another $10 million in one-time expenses during the quarter for technology consultants, lawyers, and other outside advisors. Look at the distance between the two ends of this story. At one end, a person trying to convince someone they belong. At the other, hotel disruption, unavailable digital services, an emergency response across a major corporation, and an estimated $100 million hit to operating results. That is the contradiction that made MGM important. Companies can spend enormous amounts protecting machines, firewalls, monitoring, identity systems, security teams. But companies still depend on humans making decisions about other humans, and support teams have one particularly difficult job. They exist to restore access when legitimate employees lose it. They're supposed to be helpful. That's the feature. And under the wrong circumstances, it becomes the weakness.
MGM was not the end of Scattered Spider. U.S. authorities continued investigating and charging people they alleged were connected to the broader criminal ecosystem. In July 2026, the Justice Department announced that a 19-year-old alleged Scattered Spider member had been arrested in Finland and extradited to the United States. The complaint did not accuse him of carrying out the MGM intrusion, but authorities described Scattered Spider as a broader campaign linked to more than 100 network intrusions. MGM was not evidence of one clever conversation that happened once. It was evidence of a criminal model that could be repeated. And that is why this story matters beyond casinos. The attackers did not invent trust. They found a way to weaponize it. Every large organization needs people who can grant access, restore accounts, solve emergencies, believe employees when something has gone wrong. Technology can place barriers around those decisions. But eventually, somewhere, a system still has to answer a very old question. Are you really who you say you are? At MGM, the consequences of getting that question wrong spread far beyond a computer screen, into hotel rooms, onto casino floors, across reservation systems, and eventually into a financial report carrying a $100 million estimate. The casino had locks, it had alarms, it had security teams, it had technology. But the most important door in the entire story may have opened for a completely different reason. Nobody broke it down. Someone was convinced to open it.